Welcome to Getting Mentioned by AI, the podcast where we explore how content gets discovered, ranked, and cited in an AI-first world. My name is Mike, and today I'm talking to myself about something that every creator, business owner, or strategist should understand. It is how to actually structure your content so that AI sees the logic behind it. We're not talking about keyword stuffing or SEO tricks, but it's about the framework that LLMs like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc. can interpret, connect, and then cite. We're going to break it down layer by layer, the pillar pages that define the topic, the sub-pages that explain them, and the blog posts that prove them. By the end, you'll know exactly what belongs where and how it all ties together and why this structure is the foundation of true GEO, Generative Engine Optimization. So let's get started. In the previous episode, if you listened, I talk about what the foundational concept would be if you are building or optimizing specifically for GEO or getting mentioned by AI. And I am now personally on a level or at a stage where I am building a content hub from scratch for the sole purpose of getting mentioned by AI. And I have my skeleton when it comes to my website. My foundation is there, and I'm now at a point where I have to start filling it with content. And so high level this week, the big question that I have is, okay, if I know the structure I'm going with, which is the idea of a pillar page, sub-pillar, and then a blog post, what kind of content would actually go on each page and why, and how does that all relate together? And as I am diving into that for myself, I thought I would record a little solo episode today just to kind of take you through some of the learnings that I have in hopes that it might inspire you one way or another as you're going on your own kind of geo journey. Now, the big thing here, and in last week's episode, I talked about it in more detail, is the idea that the baseline here is the idea that every single page on your website now has a role to play, right? The whole structure that you're building has a certain purpose. You can't anymore put all your focus and energy just in your blog post section and then write long tail keyword, 5,000 word blog posts in hopes that it will start to rank. That no longer applies. If you remember from last week, I talked about the tree analogy where it's like you have your trunk, then you go and branch out into different branches, and then you have your leaves. That's kind of the analogy that we're going with. And so for me, pillars, sub-pillars, blog posts is the idea that pillars teach, sub-pillars explain, and blogs prove a certain point. That's the logic of my content knowledge hub platform that I am building. Because this is, from a structured perspective, how people read and consume information, and it's also how AI reads and consumes information as well. For transparency, just so you're kind of aware, I am building in the cruise niche because I love to go on cruises. I go a lot on cruises, and I'm just picking a subject that is very close to home in the sense that I am interested in it, passionate about it. And so it's important because this is a long time commitment, or what's the right phrase here? We don't know how fast this can go or maybe how long it will take. So I have to make sure that at least content wise, it's something I'm interested in. And so many of the examples that I will give today are of course related to my niche, but of course, please keep in mind, you can exchange that at any certain point with any kind of niches or topics that you're interested in, right? It's just about the high level concept here. And so if we start at the top with the trunk of my tree, which is the pillar page, it's the idea that a pillar page defines an entire concept. It is the master guide. And so for my website, I have identified 6 pillars. These are 6 core topics that people always have questions around. For example, one of my pillars I am calling Solo Cruise Basics. The job of the pillar page is to teach someone, or in this case, to teach AI what solo cruising actually means. I'm going to repeat that. A pillar page defines an entire concept. It is the master guide. So for me, its job is to teach someone or AI, for me in this case, what XXX actually means. And because my pillar page is solo cruise, in this case it becomes what solo cruising actually means. When you then look at how do you structure and format a pillar page, there are a few things you can play with. Number one, at the top, you need a short, clear definition of what your topic actually means. Meaning no fluff, no crazy jargon. So for me, it would literally say solo cruising means booking and sailing alone. Very simple. So at the top, you start with a short, clear definition of your topic. Below that comes the why. The why means that you talk about the trends, who it is for, what are the benefits, what are the challenges. Why is it that this topic is basically a pillar page within your niche? Under that would come the how. How does it work? What's different from when traveling with, in my case, a lot of other people, right? So you start with your definition, then the why, then the how, and then you get to a quick overview of some of key areas. And all of these key areas that you might mention will link down to a sub-pillar page. So another way to look at these key areas is maybe just a bunch of questions that people would have, right? All the different areas where you can think a lot of questions around that you might be able to create sub-pillar pages around. Either way, you're going to always end your pillar page with a short FAQ section where you will answer broad questions around the topic that you build your pillar page around. What's very important with regards to your pillar page is that it is not a sales page and it's also not a fluffy story page. It is basically the dictionary entry, the definition of whatever it is that you want to talk about, plus context as to why, how, and what are important areas within that, plus an FAQ. Every sub-pillar page is going to link up to this pillar page. And this pillar page is going to link down to these sub-pillar pages. And that is going to form a circular logic that AI really, really loves. If we then look at the sub-pillar pages, which is the branches of my tree, the way to think about it is that every sub-pillar page that you create, it basically zooms into one piece, one area of, let's call it the big idea, the big topic that is your pillar page. So for me, when I look at my pillar page, which would be solo cruise basics, a sub-pillar page for me would be best cruise lines for solo travelers. That is a very logical branch or sub-page that comes straight out of solo cruise basics. The job here of the sub-pillar page is just to give depth and to give context, answering one main reoccurring question that solo cruisers would have, specifically from a basic or foundational perspective. Looking at the structure of a sub-pillar page, it is a little bit the same as your pillar page, but a few nuances here. Number one, you're going to start with an introduction that is going to connect back to the pillar page. So you might start with a sentence such as explained in Solo Cruise Basics, right? So that connects back to my pillar page. So that's what you start with, a short introduction that connects back to the pillar page. Then you're going to add a clear breakdown or comparisons. So maybe you might add a table or something along those lines. In my example, because my sub-pillar page is what cruise line is the best for solo travelers, I might put in a table comparing 5 cruise lines. Next to then, so again for context, a short intro, then a breakdown or comparison, and then you're going to add some practical advice or practical steps. How to is basically the way to think about it. Then you're going to add visuals. So you want to have a chart, you want to have a pro and con list, you want to have something visual on your sub-pillar page. If possible, specifically as you're growing your content or your knowledge platform, you're going to add a few related links that goes sideways. So you might connect sideways to other sub-pillar pages. For example, in my case, I might also link to sub-pillar pages about the different solo cruise cabins that exist, or something about solo cruise costs, right? So very logically, I will add some sub-pillar pages that I can link to. Last but not least, you are going to link down to supporting blog posts, and these blog posts will be reviews, personal stories, maybe solo cruise deals in my case. So it's the idea that the sub-pillar page will link up to the parent pillar, and it does that for authority purposes, and it's going to link down to a blog post or blog posts for more detail within the sub-pillar page content. So the sub-pillar page, and I'm sorry if the terminology is a little bit confusing, is the idea that this page is the middle layer, and this middle layer keeps the structural logic, if that makes sense. From there, we move to the blog post. This is a little bit where I struggled, because in my original thinking, I thought, can't I just take everything and just make everything a sub-pillar page? Like, what is the exact point of having a blog section still on your platform? But again, it's the idea that the leaves in my tree analogy, which are the blog posts, it's the idea that my comment here says it makes the site feel alive. So the job of the blog post is to show examples, talk about experiences, and really function as a support towards a sub-pillar. So it means that if my sub-pillar page would be best cruise lines for solo travelers, blog posts that I would have to support the content on best cruise lines for solo travelers would be my first Royal Caribbean solo cruise, what I learned. That could be a blog post. Top 5 solo cruise deals for January 2026. That could be another blog post, right? And when you look at the structure of your blog post, it's a bit more flexible, right? But it's the idea that your blog post still needs to have a clear, specific focus. So you're talking about just one story, or you're answering again one question, because it's all about clarity. You will add real experiences or data to your blog post. You will add practical tips in your blog post, and you will link back up to the sub-pillar that it supports. Plus, at the end, you might put in an optional CTA, which could be read the full guide on whatever your main pillar page would be. And so again, the blog post is always going to link up. It will never link sideways. So very, very important. Your blog post cannot link to other blog posts. It can only link upward to a sub-pillar post, because its purpose is to reinforce the content of the sub-pillar. It is like a leaf feeding into the branch. Little bit of a cheesy analogy, but that is of course the way to look at it. So if you want to think in terms of summary, how it all ties together in one clear pathway, sticking with my solo cruise analogy, it's the idea that somebody is going to go to Claude. Let's go with Claude. Is going to type into Claude, what is the best cruise line for solo travelers? That's the question Claude needs to find an answer for. The answer to that question is going to start with my pillar page, which is called Solo Cruise Basics, because here I define what solo cruising actually is. Claude then moves to my sub-pillar, which is called the best cruise lines for solo travelers, where I am explaining the options that you have as a solo cruiser. Finally, Claude can reference a blog post that I wrote called My First Royal Caribbean Solo Cruise to find real life examples. And what I am building here is a reasoning chain. So I define, I explain, and then I illustrate. It's how we learn as humans, but it's also how AI cites sources. Every layer I create is feeding off the next. And there is a loop that kind of backs it up. It goes up, down, or down, up. So when I now look at my empty solo cruise platform, I keep a very simple rule in mind, and this is something that you can keep in mind as well. Your pillar is the what, your sub-pillar is the how, and your blog is the proof with real stories, opinion, and fresh updates. Every pillar feeds the sub-pillar, every sub-pillar feeds the blog, and every blog links back to its parent. Nothing on your website floats alone and by itself. Everything has to connect back upward, right? It's not about having, a very tidy navigation on your website. It is about what makes AI understand your site and what makes AI really trust your site. And if you build it this way, with this very basic but clean structure where everything links together and it links back up, then I believe my platform is not just going to rank traditionally, but more importantly, I think it will all make sense for AI to understand, and that is exactly what I am after. So I'm going to end this little extra episode here today. I will report back in a couple weeks with some real examples and stories on what this really looks like in real life, and then I will let you know if this is easier said than done. But this is the structure and the format that I go with as to how I am approaching my geo journey, and I hope that you can learn a little bit from that as well. What I will do is I will post this on our website, on our blog, on gettingmentionedbyai.com, so you can see and read through yourself, and hopefully you get a really good visual there. But I will put down again the overview of pillar page, what the purpose is, what goes on it, and then how it connects for pillar, sub-pillar, and blog post. So that being said, I'm going to end today's episode. I will see you in the next one. Ed will be back, of course, and I look forward to catching you there or on our website, gettingmentionedbyai.com.